please? Because who am I kidding? Okay, there we go. If we were in Nepal, we would put our hands together and we would say namaste. So, namaste. Somebody raise their hand and tell me why we would put our hands together and we would not shake hands. Shanita. Right, because when we talked about this, when they don't shake hands, because, Hermie, what were you going to say? They wipe with their left. Okay, no toilet paper. This is a country with no toilet paper. So they wipe with their left, they do everything else with their right, but they greet, and Mrs. Martinez did bring this to my attention. You know, what happens when you put your left and your right hand together? Yeah. Nasty. Thank you so much. All right. So if we were in any place in Nepal, we would say namaste. Nepal is divided into two sections, basically, and I'm going to go super short on this so that these photos will make sense to you. Hang on, just a second. Okay, much better. All right, if I don't put this down, I want to make sure my numbers are correct. Nepal is 497 miles long. That's not, wait, but don't start these, please, yet. It's 497 miles long. That's not very far. That's just like from here past San Francisco. And it's 93 to 155 miles across. Basically, have you ever heard of the state of Arkansas? Have you ever heard of the state of Illinois? State of Indiana? Picture any one of those little states, and that's the size of the entire country of Nepal. Now, keep that image. Okay, keep a visual. Whichever one you know better, Indiana, Illinois, or Arkansas, whichever one makes more sense to you in your head. Okay, here we go. There are, in this tiny little country, there are 29 million people. Just to give you an example, in the entire state of New York, there's only 19 million people. So put 10 million more people in that tiny little state that you've got pictured in your head, and that's Nepal, okay? Guess how much the annual salary is a year? $653 a year is how much they make, okay? Many of your parents pay that much each month for you to go to school, for how much they make in a year, okay? In that tiny little state of Arkansas, Indiana, or Nepal, or Illinois, this country of Nepal, there are 127 languages. There are 101 different ethnic groups. Like we have different ethnic groups represented in this room. They have 101, okay? Only 60% of the people can read because 40% are mountain people. And if I put a line right down here and split you 50-50, if you think about your parents, your whole half, your parents don't have jobs. Only your half has jobs. Understand what that means to a tiny little country if half of the people, 50% of the people, don't have work. And their average annual salary is about what your parents paid for 1 month of private school tuition. I just want you to kind of get a visual on this, okay? 127 different languages. So, got this tiny little country, and then these are going to make sense to you. Tiny little country. Down here is a huge country called India. India believes in it's Hinduism. 80% of the people in Nepal live on the bottom part because there's not big mountains. It's flat land down here. So they are Hindu. Hindu are the people who don't eat cows, reincarnation, all those kinds of things, okay? But that's not the people that Mountain Child works with. Mountain Child works with the places that are called remote regions. So in the middle, you have what's called the hill country, and that is mountains that are from 3,000 to 12,000 feet high. Those are just the hills, no big deal, 12,000 feet. Then you have the mountains, and the mountains are the Himalayas, and they border all of Nepal. They form a natural border. You do not need fences when you have mountains of 29,000 feet tall. Okay, no, there's no border control. But above that is a huge, massive country called China, and a little, tiny little sliver of a country that China took over in the 1950s called Tibet. And in Tibet and in China, they're Buddhists. So we have Buddhist, we have Hindu. You don't see Christianity anywhere bordering anything, okay? So, 80% of the country is Hindu. About 6% of the country is Buddhist. Tibetan Buddhist, because they're from Tibet. They have fled over because they were terrified when China took over Tibet. They were so terrified of the communist country, and they were so mean at that time, that they did come over those Himalayas as much as they could. They fled to a place called Lower Mustang, and that's the upper part of Nepal, and that's where I was. So, even though 80% of the country is Hindu, we were working with what's called Tibetan Buddhist, okay? And these are the Tibetan refugees, the people who have left everything just to somehow make a new life for themselves. And that's who I was working with. So you're going to see tons of things. When you see cows everywhere, yak everywhere, mountain goats everywhere, chickens everywhere. People have much less value in this country than chickens. We stopped this entire bus to let a hen and her little chicks go by because the fine, Kyle found out, the fine is way greater if you hit a baby chick than if you hit a person, okay? Animals are revered. So you will see animals in most of my pictures because animals are everywhere there. Which is why, another reason, they don't wear their shoes when they go into a home. In other countries like Japan and Korea, they don't wear shoes either, but that's more of a respect thing. They don't wear shoes in Nepal because there's all that nastiness outside, because there's animals everywhere, but there is everywhere, okay? So, and I'm normally like cool with that, but not going into houses. So you take off your shoes always, which worked for me. You're gonna see in a lot of these pictures, flags. Have you ever seen my mountain, Mount Everest? Have you ever seen the flags? There's always flags, colorful flags waving. And I've always thought, what a lovely idea. They have these prayer flags. They have spiritual people. They are not. They are lazy people. Because what these flags are, my husband grew up Catholic. And he would go to confession. And confession, they would say 5 Hail Marys, and they would say the Our Father prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom, that kind of thing. Prayers that are like set prayers, okay? Well, in Buddhism, they have set prayers. But instead of actually praying them, they write them on flags. And they just string flags everywhere. And they believe that that's their prayers, just constantly going up to the gods, which there are hundreds of them. They feel that they think that their prayers are just constantly going up. So then they don't actually feel the need to pray because they're kind of covered, because they have flags everywhere that are doing the praying for them. So when we see these prayer flags, it doesn't represent diligence, it doesn't represent holiness or a spirit of heart, it represents kind of laziness, because they're not even praying now, they're just letting the flag do it. Same thing, you'll see some prayer wheels, same idea. They walk like this, and they spin these wheels, just like this. They just walk along spinning wheels, because the wheels have the prayers printed on them, and they're like, happy, we're covered, we prayed. Okay, it's the same, that's what you're going to see. I'm trying to think of the things to say before they start. This is a slideshow. And I had to do it as a slideshow, meaning it would keep going, because if not, all the parents that came to see me would not be getting to work today, because I could talk about this all day long. The biggest thing that I have to struggle with, or I'm struggling with, is it's difficult for me to see these pictures because it was amazing. It was so amazing that it's almost too soon for me to be talking about it because it's so tender for me. You came on this journey with me. I worked so hard. We worked so hard to get here between Kyle and Kimberly and Cody and myself. Many of you bought so many books. I can't thank you enough. How many people did Free Friday last year? That was amazing. That was a huge chunk. That was a huge portion that you contributed. So I feel kind of like you journeyed with me on this. My new little baby doll, 6th graders, you weren't here. So you get to kind of hear the tail end of this, okay? 2 other things. In Nepal, you say namaste. When you're at the border of Tibet, which is where we were, you say tashi dele. Namaste means I greet the God within you. Tashi dele means that, because that's Buddhism, it means basically like peace, joy, and love, kind of an idea. But there's a cool thing. If you were an early Christian and it was against the law to be a Christian, right after Jesus died, you would walk up in the sand, and with your foot, you wouldn't kick the microphone, you would make a half of a fish. And if you were a believer, you knew what that meant, and you would make the other half of the fish. And it was a big secret, but that's how believers identified with each other, how they connected, how they said, I'm a believer, you're a believer, yay, that kind of thing. There's a word called Jamesy. And Jamesy basically means praise the Lord, but it's a made-up word. It's a brand new word. And the only people that know it are born-again Christians. So I would say Jamesy, and if the person looked at me kind of like you're looking at me now, like I would be like, namaste, and we'd move on, and I would know that they're not. But we went to one little school, and you're going to see, I'll point out this kid when I do. He was running around everywhere going, Jamesy, 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 and I'm like, I got one, Jamesy, there's a Christian here. Because most villages that we went to, our goal was to go village to village looking for the one believer, the one. There weren't multiple, there was one. There was one village that there was a tiny little church, and I'm going to show you the pastor. She's a woman. Our goal was to go to the villages, find that one believer that we knew that was there, pray over them, give them a Nepali Bible, see how we could support them, find out how Mountain Child could support them or provide anything for them. So that was our goal. Along the way, we shared the gospel with everybody who would listen. We gave them little tracts because books there are like sacred. So they would take a tract, a little written testimony of the gospel, just so that they could own a little book, which was super cool. So obviously, like I say, I could talk till 3, but let's get started. Can we turn off the front lights or all the lights?